So welcome back, everybody, to this final session of the 6th annual ICOACHKIDS conference. I'm sure you'll agree that the breakout sessions were all very energizing, very interesting. So another big round of applause for those that were responsible for the breakout. To welcome our next set of speakers, I would like to welcome Sergio Lara-Berthiel.
Okay, everyone. Good to see so many of you still here. Okay, we are in the last session. Okay, but we probably any of the other speakers here? We saved the best for last. Normally joking. No, look, we definitely saved a really important topic for last. Okay, because over the next hour or so we're going to be discussing disability in youth sport, and we're also going to be looking at the issue of women and girls in youth sport. Okay, so very two important topics that I know are very relevant to a lot of you, and we've got really top-notch speakers to do this. In the first session, we're going to look at disability in youth sport, challenges and opportunities, and we're going to do so with two people that I profoundly admire. Okay, Declan O'Leary and Jon-Paul Germain. Jon-Paul is the Vice President of Sport Development for Special Olympics International, responsible for overseeing Special Olympics sport development globally. If you want to know more about Jon-Paul, go on the extended program, because I want to really get them on the stage as soon as possible. And Declan, I've been fortunate to work with Declan now for nearly a decade. Worked in coach education, supporting national governing bodies in implementing coach development programs in Ireland and beyond. And he's also the lead for disability sport for Sport Ireland. So without further ado, please welcome Jon-Paul and Declan.
Thank you, Sergio. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to do a few slides first and speak, and Jon-Paul is going to come up and blow you out of the water. So the first thing I wanted to do is say welcome. And while Sergio has said that the topic is on disability and girls, I actually wanted to say that this presentation is really about you. And I'm using you in the plural as a collective, but I'm also using you as an individual. And one of the reasons for that is that when we look at people with a disability in sport, you got to go back to the background and the context. Now, we've heard from all the speakers about the benefits of being involved in sport. But we have to recognize that people with a disability are behind the curve. They're not as involved in sport as we'd like, and therefore they're not getting the benefits from being involved in sport. And the reason for saying this presentation is about you is that in your role, when you're involved in sport, I want you, moving forward, to use a lens of if what we're doing could also include and provide opportunities for people with a disability. So in Ireland, we have the evidence that we use comes from this study, the CISPA study, we call it, from 2018. And we find that in post-primary community sport participation, 61% with no disability take part, but 43% with a disability take part. And then it's back to you again in your country, in your sport, in your role. Is that reflective? Because we have to, the challenge for us is to deal with this in Ireland. So that's a reciprocal question. I'm not expecting you to answer, but you should answer it for yourself. Have you seen this before? Okay. This is the pledge. And number 3 talks about being inclusive. But the reality is, for children and teenagers with a disability, all 10 of the principles of the pledge apply. And just like every other youngster that we had the evidence for from Dropout and the presentations and talent development, youngsters with a disability want to be involved in sport, and they just need to get the opportunities. So it's the application of those principles. The thing is that the other thing we've heard is that involvement in sport is very individual. So you do end up having to be quite focused on each individual that's involved in sport as a coach. And again, those coaching tools are included within the 10 principles. Planning progressive programs at 8, using different methods to enhance learning at 9, being child-centered at 1. But one that I'd really like to stress is number 5, that if we help youngsters to get a love for sport, those with a disability, those without a disability, they have a much better chance of staying involved in what we do. So the real thing I think sometimes is the challenge of walking in the shoes of the person you're trying to walk with. If you see things from their perspective, you can get greater insights into where you're going. And again, some of the presentations earlier sort of lent in that direction, that if you know what children want, and then you're child-centered, you're not presenting what you think they want, you're presenting what you're doing, and that comes through skills. So a person with a disability, by definition, have barriers to being involved in sport. And being behind the curve, like I presented, they don't develop enough what we're calling physical literacy now, and I'll come to that. So they can't do sport to the best of their ability. They can't think about it, except maybe in a way as a spectator, and they can't feel that love for sport. It's not helped because there's few opportunities for them to take part. Particularly if they're involved in local level, then they don't have role models. Again, a thing emphasized earlier. And then they're not developing, if they're not involved, this sense of belonging, this being part of, this love for sport. From the perspective of local environments and clubs, many clubs don't have a clear policy of how to include people. So when people present to be involved, they're not made welcome, the barriers remains, and they're not included. It breaks down. There's not adapted versions of the sport. This morning we had a presentation on football 2v2, 3v3, 5v5, 7v7. It takes a bit of creativity, and adapted versions of a sport means that anybody can play a sport with the creativity that's needed to let that sport be accessible. Again, some clubs don't provide the opportunities. And then in terms of coaches, many of you there, we heard of the volunteer nature of coaching, and that's definitely a challenge, because how do you bring new ideas to a volunteer workforce that turns over every 3 or 4 years? You keep having to going back to the start to introduce it again. So maybe people don't know enough about coaching people with disability. And there's definitely what people term the fear factor about maybe not knowing what to do. But there's more support and information out there. So if you examine it from those perspectives, you're kind of seeing the situations where perhaps a bit of help might be provided. Now, like some of the earlier speakers, I'm going to present a little bit about how we've dealt with this in Ireland. And there's a structure within Ireland for sport for people with disabilities. At national level, my organisation is Sport Ireland, and we look after trying to promote sport and physical activity across the whole population. We have national governing bodies or federations who are multi-sport in nature, Irish Wheelchair Association, Special Olympics, Vision Sport. Each of these are multi-sport, but try and provide opportunities and pathways for people with particular disability types to take part. But we also have our mainstream or single sport national governing bodies. And over recent times, the challenge has been for them to provide pathways and versions of their sport. At high performance level, Paralympics Ireland has been designated as sort of the expert organisation to support high performance sport in what we do. And then in local sport, we've 29 local sports partnerships, and there's a sport inclusion disability officer in each of those. So there's somebody to lend support to local people or local clubs when they ask the question. Each club, school, community group can be challenged to provide opportunities. And we also have an organization designated to support us at local level there called CARA. And I'll outline a little bit more of what they do going forward. So going back to the start, the national policies to provide the umbrella, we have a policy on participation in sport by people with disabilities on the right. And more recently, we've introduced a policy on diversity and inclusion in sport. And two of my colleagues who work in that area are here, Helen McHugh and Michael Collins, and they've been involved in the conference as well over the while. And these policies are great because they give a framework for people to be involved. But we've also just launched recently a consensus statement on physical literacy, which is all Ireland. And the reason I want to emphasize that is that whatever about national policies, and even a policy like the one on physical literacy, this actually focuses on the individual, how the individual can think, feel, and do sport. And the point I'm making here is that we probably in sport need to spend much more time developing that love of being active. And I think it's a trend that's been running across everything. Healthy involvement, love of being active, the benefits accrue. So that's something we're excited about and we'll be rolling out in Ireland. The reason I mention it here is that it's for every individual. So it's not only for you in your role helping people, but it's for you personally. I won't ask how many people have reached their national physical activity guidelines today yet. I'm sure the afternoon is when you planned it after the conference. Some of the work we've done in Ireland is that we have a sport inclusion disability charter where we asked people with disabilities what they wanted. And the 5 things that we grouped it under when they came back were openness. And that's the challenge for you again as an individual, you and your club or your organization being open to including people with disability, that the people in the working are actually prepared and open to work, but they can undergo training as well, that the activities provided are inclusive, the facilities are accessible, and finally, tell people about it, particularly the people with a disability. We've already said they're not involved, so they're not looking out for these opportunities. We have to promote it with them as well as their families. And so far, we have a process with this charter that allows your organization to sign up. And since 2018, when it was launched, there's 1,525 organizations have signed up. They're signing up to a commitment that they're going to look at these within how they operate. Each of the speakers, I found it very interesting because I prepared this away from everybody, but yet the structure I put at it is what can the federation do next? And then we'll go to the club and then we'll go to the coach. But what I'm here is saying is I'm asking the question and I'm stating that, you know, society is changing. People's involvement in sport and activity is changing. If an NGB only offers what it currently offers, I'm saying it's not a smart NGB. A smart NGB is learning from the evidence being produced and staying up with society and the changes and what people want. It's a service organization. And there's a question to be asked. If I want to play your sport, do you want me to? And can you provide the opportunity to me? And if an NGB answers that in the negative, well, what's their purpose? If you're a person with a disability, that does bring challenges to the National Federation, but ones they should embrace and ones they should look towards. To help the organizations, particularly who signed onto the charter, we have this accessible program. There's a bronze, silver, and gold levels in it. And we're hoping that organizations will become not only sign up to the charter, but achieve these levels which display a standard of inclusion until it's just almost not spoken about because it is part of the offer of the institution. Interestingly, This accessible program is, there's a club version of it to be launched in the next few weeks in Ireland, which is great because it takes it down. So with clubs, schools, community groups, the suggestions here are similar: develop a clear policy, grow your capacity, adapt versions of a sport, look at adapted equipment, and provide opportunities. And the support and signpost opportunities. Particularly if you're in a team sport, we've had examples of soccer earlier. There's versions of soccer called power football, which is played by youngsters in power wheelchairs. You need teams of power wheelchair users to play, so you might not have that in the club, so you can signpost opportunity. Another example would be frame football, where youngsters with limited mobility who use frames can still play football. But again, you need people with frames to play the game. So sometimes it's signposting. And the support in the system is there through the Disability Inclusion Charter, the Sport Inclusion Disability Programme, and I mentioned the accessible programme for clubs. And finally, if your role is as a coach, you're here today and you're open to learning, what I would like you to do also is challenge those who you engage with to be open to learning. We're going to ask you to do that with the range of tools from ICOACHKIDS, but in relation to having your mind open and willing to learn, including everybody who wants to be involved in the sport, is beneficial. So grow your toolkit, your coaching toolkit. And you'll see that coming a lot of the messages out of ICOACHKIDS and out of the weekend is that the relational aspects of your coaching are central to knowing what children want and what they want to do. It's the same with people with disability, particularly when their needs are very individual. Increase the emphasis on identifying the wants of the child. That's the relational aspects of it, and grow your ability to address the needs. Now, you do this every day when you coach. And two of the tools that are used are the STEP model. Some of us have been involved in practicals, and the activities were being adapted. And this STEP model is a very useful way to do it. And also the inclusion continuum is one that's available and put forward for inclusion generally, but it really works for people with disabilities as well. I also direct you to the ICOACHKIDS learning resources where information on this is available. So in conclusion, back to you, including the people online. The challenge is for you to be more of a champion for each and every child in sport, including those with disabilities. And that's be it at whatever level you're involved, development officer, policy, program delivery. And if you're a coach, develop and use your toolkit. I'll guarantee you, if you coach youngsters with a disability, it will help you to become better at developing relationships, identifying needs, delivering on wants and adapting activities, and you're going to be a better coach. It's also extremely rewarding. So I'd encourage you to do a bit of that. So thank you from me, and thank you, Shun. Have to appeal to the locals. And I'm going to pass you over to Jon-Paul. This from here, and there you go. American.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to use my time here to talk a little bit about, as a sport practitioner, what disability sport looks like. And my hope is here to give you an idea of what Special Olympics is, who we serve, and most importantly, how we can use your help. As Declan said, when you choose to be inclusive, we can be your partner, and there's a need for this. So I'm going to go through, as I said, as Sergio introduced me earlier, my name is Jon-Paul St. Germain, and I'm the Vice President of Sport Development for Special Olympics. And for those who don't know, Special Olympics is a global multi-sport organization for persons with intellectual disabilities. We're in over 200 countries, 3 million athletes, and we have competitions going on every day. Oops. Am I going the wrong way? Little commercial break.
Sometimes. No,
Okay. Yeah. So our founder, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, knew firsthand what marginalization and exclusion of people with intellectual disability was like. Her sister Rosemary had an intellectual disability, so she knew this right away and became a passionate advocate for social inclusion. And she chose sport as her vehicle for change. The program started in her backyard pool, and Mrs. Shriver was our original coach. Everything that we do started with her vision. So people ask you, what do children with intellectual disabilities, why do they like to play sport? And we've covered a lot of these over the day and a half here, right? Same things. They want to have fun, they want to have friendship, they want a sense of belonging, good health, be active, be challenged, success, and achievement. The difference is for Special Olympics is sport isn't just a nice thing to do. It's if they don't have access to sport, there's health disparities. So we know that people with intellectual disabilities are more likely to be overweight, have obesity issues, hypertension, diabetes, muscle weakness, low muscle tone, low functional strength, mental ill health, including depression. Even with our own research within the population of Special Olympics, we find that 32% of our Special Olympics athletes age 8 to 19 are likely to be obese. And that number moves up to 67% when they become adults. So all the information that you've heard about sedentary lifestyles, same with this population, but even more. So what are the why do they experience these discrepancies? So more than their diagnosis, intellectual disability in itself isn't a health disparity, but other factors come into it. In particular, physical inactivity and social isolation are huge factors. People with disabilities in general are less active, and people with intellectual disabilities within that group are 40% less active than those. So it's a big issue. What's our solution here? First of all, we depend greatly on our global coaching community. The coaches are the most important part of our program. We believe in our ethos that every person deserves an opportunity to participate in sport, and it's the coaches that make that happen at the grassroots level. So the coaches are our conveners, they're our planners, our organizers, our architects, our sport coaches, and our life coaches. And we're better together. What we mean by this is that, as I just said, we need to partner with other organizations. So we actively seek out partnerships at the international level with organizations like ICOACHKIDS, with international sport federations. We work at the national level with organizations, the national federations like the German Basketball Federation and others. And we work at the local club level and local school level. All those are where we can work together to engage more people with ID. So how do we do this? We have different innovative programs to improve and increase participation. One of those is our Special Olympics Unified Sports Program. Our Unified Sports Program is an inclusive program that brings people with intellectual disabilities and people without on the same team together to build friendships and foster social inclusion off the field of play. So this increases the relevancy of Special Olympics and the interaction that people may not already have. And we deliver that program through different mediums and different delivery channels, including schools. So our Unified Champion Schools is a point where we introduce unified sports as a catalyst, but then we lay on top of that youth development. We create advocacy programs for people with and without intellectual disability become advocates for social inclusion. Our Special Olympics Young Athletes Program is our entry point. So it's a physical education program for people with children with intellectual disability for the ages of between the ages of 2 and 7. So an example of a community structure. This is a program in my hometown in Holden, Massachusetts, in the United States. So Holden Youth Soccer Club is a mainstream club of about 800 kids. between kindergarten and high school. It's got recreational programs, competitive programs. Well, we offer unified sports too, as a way to increase opportunities for people with intellectual disabilities. But it's also a way, and this is one of the issues that we talk about, is how do we retain more people in sport? It's a way of re-engaging kids without intellectual disabilities. Because what we find in Holden Youth Soccer, like all the other numbers here, it's this drop off at age 12. When kids move up, they find out all those things that we talked about. They're no longer feel like they're as good as their friends, maybe the pressure of competition. Unified sports allows them to engage in a different way in sport, about a social impact program. So we're retaining more athletes with and without through unified sports in this local club. Finally, I wanted to talk about the coaches again, because it's the heart of our program. What is success for a coach in Special Olympics? Well, first, a coach in Special Olympics from the day one in their season, they're not thinking about how did they go undefeated, or how many medals can they take home, or are they going to win the tournament? They inherently understand that their job is to use sport to have an impact off the field of play, promoting social inclusion. And for this reason, the values of Special Olympics are very strongly aligned with ICOACHKIDS. We love and promote the 10 principles of the ICOACHKIDS Pledge, and we look forward to continuing working with ICOACHKIDS as we engage more individuals with intellectual disabilities and build a core of coaches that are dedicated to a positive, transformative sport experience for all. So lastly, I wanted to tee up a video with our event coming up. We have the Special Olympics World Games will be happening here in Germany, in Berlin, in June 17th to 25th. And in the spirit of collecting data and doing research, I kind of want to get a sense from this room, but maybe by the raise of hands, if you could tell me if you know about Special Olympics World Games in Berlin. So just give me a show of hands. You've ever heard anything about it? All right, so I'm going to say that's about 50%, maybe a little less, which is really helpful because now we can go back to our organizing committee and tell them we had a little more work to do. But this is going to, and we're going to do it right now. So I'm going to tee up this this video. And actually, right before that is Jenny. Are you in the room here? So Jenny is holding up a brochure there. So if you're in Germany or you plan to be Germany this summer and you'd like to volunteer for the World Games, please contact Jenny. And also I want to introduce Maren as well from Special Olympics Germany. So Jenny and Jenny and Maren are both with Special Olympics Germany. So if you have an interest in not just volunteering for Special Olympic for the World Games, but you want to engage here in Germany, any federations, you want to do research, please contact either of those two. So with that, we'll tee up the video here.
Wir sind Champions. Warum? Weil in uns ein Feuer brennt. Ein Feuer, das wir in die ganze Welt tragen. Von Athleten zu Athlet. Von Arena zu Arena. Von Mensch zu Mensch. Von einer Revolution, die wir mit einer Flamme gestartet haben. Zu den Weltspielen von heute. Bis zu dir. Sei dabei!